Joining us right now is one of our favorites, my colleague from the NFL Media Group, getting ready for the Insiders, Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Tom?
Doing well. What's up to my boys in the studio?
Fantastic. I got to ask a question that I don't know if the radio audience is going to understand because they can't see it. But you got something on your upper lip, Tom. You want to wipe that off? What is that?
Wow, Tom.
What do we got here? What's going on? What's happening?
So this is one of the only weeks of the year, Rich, that I don't have to see the light of day a whole lot on TV.
Yes.
You know, sometimes, as the great philosopher Jerry Seinfeld once said, you have to take a vacation from yourself. But really, I'm figuring maybe I can be like the Punxsutawney Phil of the Raiders quarterback competition. Right now, this is coming in much more Aiden O'Connell than Gardner Minshew, so I would be buying stock right now in AOC.
But this is a choice, Tom. This is what we call a choice because you do appear to be well-shaven on the cheeks and beard area. This is a choice that you have made here, and I'm wondering what's going on. What's up with the choice? This is the Insiders. This is the Insiders on the mustache front, Tom.
This is as inside as it gets right here. I cut my lip shaving a week ago, my upper lip, and I can't shave it again or it will start bleeding everywhere. So I got about one more week of this until my wife will be able to bear to look at me again. But I'm glad that I got to roll it out right here on the show, Rich.
Okay, well, all I'm just saying is that if you hold on for 3 more weeks, okay, right now it's very Paul Skeens-like.
Yeah, Skeens has a stash.
Don't you think? I mean,
keep it.
And Livy probably likes that.
Okay,
so all I'm saying, Tom, you know, because you have a few days of residency here in the middle of July when I take my annual vacation in July. You could show up here in Los Angeles and make a killing in Van Nuys, California with that thing. So just be careful, okay, Tom? That's all I'm saying.
I believe I'm coming in July 15th.
Yep.
If this is still on my face by then, I'm going to be coming there as a divorced man. So we'll see how this shakes out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Pelissero, giving us the inside
Great to see
information. Didn't expect to start this way, but also didn't expect to see that on my Zoom today, Tom.
No.
And by that, I mean that. Okay,
Tom Pelissero, we're requesting you to have that full mustache.
Here's what I'm saying.
Like the mustache,
Here's what I'm saying. You know what this is like? Tom, I'm sorry. What this is like is folks here in Los Angeles when they go working out in a gym with like a ski cap on. It's like, you don't need that, okay? It's 75 degrees out. It's 80 degrees out. You're using what I grew up with as a necessity, as an accessory. You don't need that.
I'm wearing one of those ski caps today.
Okay, what I'm saying is though, I've got a beard on because I don't, I'm out of options. You got a full head of lettuce. I don't understand. But this is out of necessity you're talking about. So I get you.
Just like to feel a little different, like to feel like it's the off season, Rich. This is where we landed.
Okay. So you want to answer Chris Brockman's question as to why Trevor Lawrence got paid with the one playoff win and a couple of seasons around it that weren't very first overall draft choice like, Tom?
When I was out there a couple of weeks ago, Brockman wasn't overly thrilled with me because he posed the what's
more likely
of Tua versus Trevor Lawrence and which one of them would get a $50 million plus payday. I didn't choose one. I said both. And that's the reality that all these quarterback contracts now are going to be $50 million plus. I think that where the Trevor Lawrence one is going to surprise some people was the fact that it went all the way to Burrow. It went to $55 million per year because that now bears on the Tua situation, on Jordan Love. I don't think it really bears on the Dak Prescott situation because that was always in all likelihood going to be upwards of $55 million. But now where you could have an intellectual debate of whether a Tua contract should be closer to 50 or 60 million, now you have to look at this if you're his agent and say 55's the floor, and we want to beat that because Trevor Lawrence statistically has not done what Tua has done over the past couple of years with Mike McDaniel there. Yes, Trevor Lawrence has a playoff win, which Tua does not, but every young quarterback coming up now, we went from 40 to 45 to 50. Now 55 is really going to be the baseline for all these deals to get done. And so make no mistake, that does complicate some things when teams are trying to budget this out and figure out exactly where these numbers should be.
So then Chris's pushback, if you don't mind me pushing back for you, Chris, because I think you're giving voice to what a lot of folks who are watching this and listening to it are saying,
speak for the people.
Is what then why who cares what an agent is demanding? Who cares? And I know that agent represents somebody that's very important to the franchise and the locker room and the health of it. And by the way, this is pushback on the other side of it. I understand what you're saying, but why isn't there a team that's willing to deliver a market correction of significance that might even cause a fracture of a relationship and then start from scratch at the quarterback spot? Why won't they do that?
Well, I talked to a GM for a different team this morning who made that exact same point, which was what he said was, I would let Tua play it out. Now, the issues that you create when you let your quarterback play out a fifth-year option on a contract is, number one, there's a leverage piece to this. Daniel Jones was in a different situation. It was a unique situation because him and Saquon were both free agents at the same time. And so you ended up in a situation where they wanted to get the deal done with Saquon, tag Daniel Jones. Saquon ends up turning down a big deal. Then you've got to pay Daniel Jones to be able to keep that together here. There's also just the relation. Yeah, there is the relationship with the player and your locker room dynamics and all that stuff. But the GM who called me this morning was just saying, like, you can't do a deal at that number. It's gone too far. And so certainly, Rich, there's going to be teams to look at this and say, we're not comfortable going there. I mean, when Daniel Jones got 40 last year, it blew people's minds. Obviously, Tua has produced at a higher level over the last couple of years statistically. Daniel Jones, though, also has been a part of a playoff win like Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence now is going all the way to 55. There certainly has been discussion within the league, Rich, among certain owners about even the idea of a quarterback cap, that at some point you want quarterback numbers to not go over a certain percentage of your salary cap. To my knowledge, that really hasn't gained traction, in part because so many teams have paid their quarterbacks. And if you went to suddenly an NBA model where all of a sudden you have the max and the super max, and there's really only a couple levels that guys can get paid at, it kind of changes the dynamics in terms of how you set yourself up salary cap wise and whatnot. So absolutely, there's been a discussion about exactly what you're talking about, which is, how are we paying this much money to this position and to certain guys just because they're the next one up? And that's where that Trevor Lawrence contract for some people is going to be one of those moments where Trevor Lawrence matching Joe Burrow as the highest paid player in NFL history, given a little bit of the inconsistency we've seen from Trevor Lawrence, the fact that he and the Jaguars did not play well down the stretch last year, it does give some people pause, but it's also a reflection that the quarterback market, like the salary cap, is going to continue to go up. So the longer you wait, the higher these numbers are probably going to be, absent what you're talking about, which would be some team convincing a player to take a sub-market deal, which is really hard to do in 2024.
And you also open yourself up to, listen, a contract like Trevor Lawrence given in that way, to somebody whose resume might not be as decorated as your quarterback, who may be up soon, but it's Shad Khan's team, right? And it's Trent Baalke's salary cap to figure out. And if the owner's like, I love this kid, he's done everything, I want to, sure, if we can we go a little higher, then have him match Burrow, because I kind of want to walk around saying I've done right by my guy, and I think that actually might be a metric that gets us through a tough game, because he believes that we have his back. And we did the same thing similar to Josh Allen. And so you open yourself up to that owner doing that thing. The Jaguars are going along their merry way, and it's somebody else's bag to hold now. They don't care. Why would they? So where do things stand with Jordan Love as we speak right now? Because Jordan Love is like, he damn near made the NFC Championship game in his first foray. Yeah,
you don't have as big of a track record on Jordan Love just because it's a one-year starter, but he was playing at a very high level the back half of last season into the playoffs. That last interception notwithstanding, I think that it's a lot like Tua, where the Trevor Lawrence numbers come in. And while previously you could say, well, Joe Burrow's been to a Super Bowl, we're not going to want to go above Joe Burrow, but we'll get you in right underneath. Now, all of a sudden, it's Trevor Lawrence got 55. Why isn't Jordan Love getting substantially more than that? I believe he's due like $11 million this season as part of that bridge contract he did a year ago, which gave him a raise in 2023 and effectively bought out his 2024, what would have been the option year. There's no way Jordan Love, in my estimation, is playing for $11 million this year. I do believe that they are going to figure out that contract, but no question, every time one of these deals get done, the other ones become more expensive. There's not a lot of occasions in recent NFL history, especially at the quarterback position, where you wait and the price becomes better, which of course brings us to the whole Jerry Jones and leaves falling and all that good stuff, that all of a sudden his quarterback, whether it's in Dallas or otherwise, is probably quite possibly going to be in line to be the first $60 million man.
Do you think the Dolphins test anything on this conversation with Tua, or this thing gets done with a 5 in a spot that everyone's comfortable with? I know I'm asking you to crystal ball it, but go for it, Tom.
Well, I would say that the Dolphins have been trying, and I know his agent was in Miami during the minicamp or leading up to the minicamp, so it seemed like maybe there was a pathway forward to get a deal done. They weren't able to do that at that time, but the Dolphins have been very committed to let's sign up Tua Tagovailoa as our long-term quarterback. I think that it's the part of this that we sometimes lose is the human aspect of things, and when you remember everything that Tua has been through in his life, in his career, last year, or go back 2 years ago, and the world wanted Tua Tagovailoa to retire, regardless of how many concussions he actually had, regardless of what happened in Miami, what happened in Cincinnati, all that stuff, what it looked like on the field. We all have those images still in our heads, but there was this massive push for people who were not totally familiar with Tua Tagovailoa's medical history and were not Tua or his people or the Dolphins, who were saying he can't play again. This guy should never be on the field again. It's irresponsible. And then Tua gets back out there. Last offseason, he takes jiu-jitsu lessons, learns to fall better, plays every game. Last season, it was not just the concussion issues, but he had a variety of things that he went through in the early portion of his career. Last year was the healthiest he's played, and he played at a high level, although the Dolphins, much like the Jaguars, didn't play their best at the end of the season with some injuries to guys like Waddle and Mostert at the skill spots that impacted them. So now if you don't pay Tua Tagovailoa, when his press conference a couple of weeks ago, he made abundantly clear that he's up to speed on the on the dynamics of the conversation. He has gotten updates. He thinks a lot of progress has been made. If all of a sudden you get to a spot at, okay, let's say you play hardball, we're pulling the offer, you can play out the option here. Does that cause Tua to press? Does that cause him to maybe hold the ball longer and take more shots? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not inside the meeting rooms knowing where the football is supposed to go. But by paying Tua Tagovailoa, by getting the deal done, you potentially, assuming health, which you can never assume, especially for somebody with a medical history, but as long as the guy stays healthy and continues to ascend, you've locked him in before the Dak Prescott deal's done, before some other quarterbacks potentially get paid, before that next group of guys, Brock Purdy and company, are up. You may end up with a better number at a time that the cap is going to continue to grow, and so you would assume that salaries are going to continue to skyrocket here. I think that you have to take into account Tua is a very unique situation for a lot of different reasons here. The Dolphins' actions have shown they want to get him done. To this point, though, they just haven't agreed on what that number is, and that number after the Lawrence deal probably moves a little bit, especially from the agent's perspective.
If you're willing to share, Tom, before we move on, the unnamed general manager that you spoke to this morning that would counsel the Dolphins to let Tua play it out. Was health the reason why the general manager has that theory, or is it something else?
No, it was just sheer economics. It was, the first question was, why did the Jaguars do that deal at 55 with Trevor Lawrence? And then if you're Tua, and now the baseline is 56 or 55.1 or whatever, his point was just let him play it out. In other words, given the history with Tua, not because of that, but just given his history, but also the fact that the numbers are so bonkers here, you have him under franchise tags for the next couple of years. And yeah, that can get ugly. And it's a road that most teams don't want to go down with their quarterback. But, your worst case scenario then is you have him this year on the option, and then you tag him twice. And again, it might get ugly and all those sorts of things, but it's 3 years where you don't have to lock up 20+% of your salary cap for the long haul. You can continue to go year to year. And these are the things that every GM in the league has to figure out with their high paid players. I mean, think about the Vikings with Justin Jefferson. I mean, $35 million per year on that deal blew the wide receiver market completely out of the water, especially when you chop off the fake years on, the Tyreek Hill deal and the Devontae Adams deal. But what are you paying for Justin Jefferson? Well, you're paying for not having to deal with a potential holdout, a high-profile standoff that leads every TV show with a guy who's in every commercial. He's the face of your organization. He's the face of the state. And you're paying for all those things. You're paying for the gritty and all those things. Tua's in a little bit different situation here, but imagine, Rich, if we're having this conversation every week for the next 3 years about Tua Tagovailoa, there is some residual impact of that. It's not the reason that you do a deal. You do a deal because you believe that this guy can really get that much better and he can be the one who can lead you to Super Bowls here. But the human aspect is also part of it here. The hardliner, it's a lot easier for a GM who's not with the team to say, I wouldn't pay the guy. I don't think he's that good. I don't think it's going to be worth it. I wouldn't tie up 20+% of my salary cap in him when you got all these other guys to pay. It's another thing to say, okay, well, if we go down that road and it gets ugly with Tua, and then a couple years from now, we don't have a quarterback at all, what do we do? That's a different type of math when it's actually your job on the line.
Well, speaking of the wide receiver market, Tom Pelissero, it's been a minute since a connection between Brandon Aiyuk and Jaden Daniels made headlines. But the former Arizona State colleagues had an exchange that made headlines because Brandon Aiyuk was talking to Jaden Daniels about his contract situation. I'd like you to interpret this exchange for me. Hit it.
Bro, what?
What happened, bro?
They said they don't want me back. I swear.
Okay. He said they don't want me back. Did the Niners tell Brandon Aiyuk we're done in these conversations, or is that something else that we should interpret, Tom?
Well, first of all, Rich, I do love that the links to which Brandon Aiyuk went to create that video to get Jaden Daniels on FaceTime, then have somebody else recording the phone. This wasn't like an inadvertent tongue slip on a video game stream or something. This was a pretty pointed message from Brandon Aiyuk. Listen, the 49ers have spent the offseason trying to get a contract done. He has the same agent, actually, as Tua Tagovailoa. They haven't been able to this point to figure out exactly what that number should be. We've seen all these massive contracts get done. Amon-Ra St. Brown at 28, Jefferson at 35. If you're Aiyuk, you're wanting to be probably somewhere in that bandwidth there. If you're the 49ers, you're saying, you haven't had the productivity that Amon-Ra St. Brown has. It's not that we don't want you back. If he interprets, hey, we're not going to give you $34 million a year as we don't want you back, that's fine. And that's Brandon Aiyuk's right. The reality is he's under contract for about $14 million this season with the 49ers. They did have trade interest prior to the draft. At that time, the price tag was really high on Aiyuk. It would have been in a trade. It would have been a first-round pick and probably more, depending exactly where that first-round pick was. Well, now the draft is gone. The 49ers were in the Super Bowl a year ago. They're pressing to try to win it all in 2024. The idea that they're now going to flip around and just get rid of Brandon Aiyuk seems a little bit convenient to a player who obviously has the relationship with Jaden Daniels going back to their Arizona State days. All of which is to say, I don't know. I can't sit here and say for certain that Brandon Aiyuk will be a member of the 49ers this season. I also think, Rich, right now it's hard to imagine that he's not. Anything can happen, but he either needs to show up for training camp or failing that for the season, or else he's going to be missing out on close to $1 million paycheck every week. If he plays out this season, he probably gets tagged in 2025. And then we're talking about, is it a tag and trade? Can you get a deal done? The price continues to go up to potentially get a deal done, assuming Aiyuk is healthy and productive. But for the 49ers, you're pretty far down the line. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they're on vacation right now. They're not thinking about trading away one of their best players. At some point, you have to make those types of hard decisions. We'll see where things go when they reconvene closer to training camp here. But I would say right now, the arrows are pointing toward Brandon Aiyuk being a part of the team in 2024, and then we'll see.
Well, then we'll finish up. Speaking of out of office, what's your reporting on Aaron Rodgers' whereabouts last week and the residual effects of it, Tom?
I've had a lot of conversations about Aaron Rodgers and the state of the Jets. I would fairly say that it's safe to assume Aaron Rodgers had something that had been long pre-planned that could only take place last weekend and was not taking place in the greater New York, New Jersey area. Everyone I have talked to has consistently said this is not something that is going to have, carryover into training camp or the regular season. It's not going to hamper them on the field. Really not going to hamper him in the locker room. He was awesome through the course of OTAs. Of course, he's coming back from the Achilles and everything. I think that this is, to a certain degree, Rich, yes, it's a story because it became a story and because this is so out of the ordinary. For a player to miss a mandatory minicamp and eat $100,000 in fines for a reason that's not contract related. However, everything with Aaron Rodgers is out of the ordinary. He's 40 years old. He's a mainstay on political talk shows. He's got a documentary that's being made about him. He experiments in plant medicine. He tried to come back from an Achilles tear in like 4 months. Nothing is ever quite normal here. But by the time that we get to training camp, besides the fact that Aaron Rodgers now is going to have to answer for where exactly he was, which I think if there's anything, Rich, that was a little bit surprising in all this, it's that Aaron Rodgers could have cleaned it up with one tweet, one quote at some point. Hey, don't even say where you're going if you don't want to. Just like, hey, worked this out months ago, got something that I have to do this weekend, but love my boys, see him in training camp. He hasn't said anything. And so until he does, until he shows up on a certain other talk show or he goes to the podium or puts out a tweet or an Instagram post or whatever, there's going to be a lot of speculation about it. I don't get the sense that anybody is really concerned about the impact that it has on the team. However, Rich, you got 32 teams in the NFL. 31 of them got to spend their mini camp week celebrating, hey, a lot of positive progress. We're finishing on a high note. We all know a lot of teams aren't going to be competitive, but nobody's won or lost a game. At this time of year, you're supposed to celebrate. What a great offseason program. We're all ready to go. And poor Robert Saleh had to stand up there for 2 days looking like he had just watched Zach Wilson throw 4 more interceptions and answer questions from reporters about where the hell his quarterback was. Once you get past that piece of it, I don't anticipate that there's a massive impact here, but is it going to be a story up until training camp? Absolutely.
Well, here's my prediction, Tom, is we won't hear from Rodgers until some local reporter at the Tahoe event he's playing golf in will find him, and he'll be willing to say something. It might be a reporter that he knows from any Northern California days or anything like that, and he'll, make light of it by also giving a jab at anybody that thought it was something that he was causing a problem. And my only concern, though, is the headlines that were created. A couple of newspapers went all in on him. And how will he handle that? And how will that be handled? Will that create, as well as the back and forth that will happen at the top of training camp, will that create any issue for a post-game press conference after he loses a game, which will happen? And will that then potentially cause an issue down the road? But
that's exactly it.
That's the one thing. That's the one thing.
The story is that it has become a story.
Right.
And this was just it's completely self-inflicted. It didn't need to be a thing. Again, there's a lot of different ways that they could have tackled it. If he misses the previous week's OTAs, which are voluntary, and he showed up for every OTA, and is back from minicamp, we're not talking about it. It's
Correct.
It's so out of the ordinary that it becomes a thing. And yeah, there's going to be certain people, whether it's in the media or fans, who are going to constantly throw that back in your face. If you don't play well, come week 1, if things go bad, there's going to be a lot of questions about it. It's just, it's a different thing. Nothing's ever normal with the Jets. Everything I've heard, Rich, out of minicamp, which you can take to heart as a Jets fan, is that this team right now, through the course of the offseason, looks better than the 2023 team did. And I'm not talking the 2023 team that started like 7 different quarterbacks. I'm talking about the offseason and what they looked like. Year 2 in this offense, they've gotten better along the offensive line. They got some big young running backs who have been really impressive through the course of camp, not just Breece Hall, but some of the other guys that they've brought in here. Mike Williams has been really good for building. You fully anticipate they're going to be good on defense as well. It's a tough spot when you're the guy who came out in January and said, we need to get the BS, the distractions out of the building. And then you create the dictionary definition of a distraction, which is the final phase of the off season. And every one of your coaches and teammates has to go up there and answer questions about why you had something more important to do than be on the field. It may not impact you. It's the same reps you would get OTAs and everything else. It's a tough spot that certain people, namely Robert Saleh, were put in the organization. Aaron, at some point, is going to have to answer that. I have interviewed Aaron on the putting green at Tahoe, Rich. So he does do that.
Yes.
Part of his warm up, he will hit the putting green. So I'd encourage, Sam Farmer, whoever is in the in the locale there, to just stake out the putting green. That's probably the best spot to get him.
Well, that is definitely the next, one would think, public appearance to expect him at, because he does love that tournament, and the tournament loves him. And we'll see. Tom, in the meantime, Aquaphor might help, a little Neosporin on that lip. And then,
in this light, I think this looks pretty good. Honestly.
I think you should just go full Fu Manchu over the next week. There you go. Tom, thanks for the time, brother. Appreciate it. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.